Yes, that is
And
true.
he still is, of course. Of course.
At the best casinos in South Dakota. Sorry.
Oh, they haven't gone that low yet.
Are you dissing on the Dakotas, or are you dissing on the band? I'm not sure which one.
Casinos, just casinos.
That was
in general.
both.
Have
Can we
they
send
found their
Victor out
shows
to
yet?
find them? They're still in LA here. They're a local band, you know.
Give it away. Give it away.
I was disappointed at a concert gig years ago when the Chili Peppers dropped out at the last minute as the lead band, but they were replaced by Nine Inch Nails, who followed, who is this, does Epic? Faith No More.
Oh, that'd be a great
It was
show.
a good gig.
That would be an
It was a
amazing
good
show.
gig. There was also L7, Screaming Trees, Primus, a whole heap of good bands. It was a great gig for the 90s.
Sounds like a Lollapalooza to me.
I once got lost driving Mark Lanigan, who's the lead singer for Screaming Trees, back to the airport. we took a couple wrong turns, and then I had dinner with Primus and broke my rib at the Nine Inch Nails show. So that brings back lots of good memories.
That's a good rock and roll evening.
Yeah, that would have been a real rock. It wasn't all in one night. It was all in over a year. Anyway. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. And this is a Monday, the 30th. And if you're in YouTube and you're watching, you can actually join the conversation with the link below in Zoom. If you are, don't try to leave comments or questions in YouTube. We're not reading them. You can get to that if you come into Zoom. If you are here and you're looking at all of these folks here and they're going to be here answering your questions and you're wondering, how can I become part of that? All you got to do is get here early. We now start at 5 Pacific Standard Time. You don't have to be here that early. You can start at 6:40 is when you have to be here, 6:40 Pacific Standard Time. Now we open up some general rooms. We do breakout rooms and people can kind of all come together at 5 and chat amongst themselves. And then at 6, we kind of have the pre-show. And then at 7, we actually start talking about things. And so 7:05. The first part is me just talking here. We have a second hour now on Monday. Today we're going to do just more general Q&A for 2 hours, but tomorrow we'll be talking about we're going to talk about preamps, and then Wednesday we're going to talk about the preamp of the camera, which is the sensor. And then so we'll be talking about preamps and then sensors and what do they mean and why are they important and how they affect our chains in both audio and video. Thursday we're going to brainstorm about concerts. I've been in a lot of conversations where people are trying to figure out how bands stay relevant and how they stay connected to their fans, given that we're probably another year away from actually seeing a lot of large scale performances. And then on Friday, we're going to talk about Zoom. Zoom has changed a lot in the last couple of weeks. And a lot of people have questions about how to take full advantage of it. So we're going to talk about Zoom on Friday, and then Saturday, of course, focus on education. So that's what's coming up. A reminder that this whole show exists because you ask questions. So make sure to get those questions in and also vote questions up. That helps us decide, if you're wondering why we move so quickly through the end of the last couple of questions, it's because you didn't vote them up. And so you need to get them in early and then vote them up often. And that will really define, what we spend our time talking about. And the best thing to do is write them down. Just write them down while you're at work. Something pops into your head. I don't really understand that. Write it down and bring it up and we'll talk about it here. Anyway, Bill, I suspect that we have some questions.
We have a good list of questions. We got 19 on deck and 3 in the firing chambers here. So the first one comes from Eric.
So for the attendees, well done. Well done. That's exactly what we're trying to get to. All right. Let's jump into it.
Eric Hall, Mount Vernon, and the panel here says, how did Grant get 3 concurrent instances of Zoom rooms pointed at discrete video outs on the M1? Note he's never operated Zoom rooms, but he's curious.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah. So just to define what we're talking about there with the Zoom rooms, is the conference room setup for Zoom. And so if you have a computer with 3 outputs, then it will go across those 3. It's the maximum you can do. And I just turned it off, Chris. it's just a bunch of black screens now. Sorry, I didn't see this coming. But so on the M1, it doesn't support any more than 2 displays natively, and so I was using a display link, USB 3 to display link that gave the third output. And then once it sees those three, then the software, you can use an iPad as the controller, and that's where you can choose what is on those three screens. So it's particularly good when you have someone screen sharing. You can then have screen share, gallery, and active speaker. Or you can pin three completely different people, and then you could send those three displays into a recorder or ISO recording. So lots of options there with Zoom Rooms.
There you go. Next, go ahead, Hosmuk.
Grant, can you then decide which Zoom room you actually send out to the attendees?
Okay, so once again, like we're talking about breakout rooms, it sounds like you're talking about breakout rooms. No.
So you have 3 Zoom rooms, right? And you can decide what shows in each Zoom room. In your event, what do the people see that attend the event?
I'm splitting hairs by saying that it's one Zoom room, but with 3 displays.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
you can choose what you display on each of those 3. That has no impact on what people see in the meeting. So you have a camera. It's interesting, actually. You must have a camera connected to that device for it to even start the Zoom room. So I found an old 640 by 480 camera that I had laying around, which was able to get it going. But once you do that, it's when you start your camera, you only have one output that's going back into the meeting for others to see, and then you can choose your three.
Is that why it doesn't? Is that why rooms don't install in the cloud? Is because they don't have access to a camera?
Well, you can get around it with the NDI virtual input. So I've had that work successfully on a Windows 10 machine. Had nothing else on it. That was the only thing. An NDI virtual input, and that worked fine. So of course I had that installed and running, but no, something else going on with that because it won't even start the process. It doesn't even. Right. It's not even starting anything. Yeah,
good. Chris?
I think what's important to remember about the Zoom room, and that's a proper noun as opposed to a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar, is its origin is as a conference room in a office building. So if you walk into a well-equipped conference room, there's going to be multiple displays. And the idea with the Zoom room controller is you can decide, actually, and on the back end, you can decide what you want to put on those multiple displays. Now, the Zoom room hardware has the option of having up to 3 displays. And there are people that are taking advantage of that in live situations to pin 3 different people, possibly into a production switcher. I'm trying to set it up to be able to ISO record 3 separate people. But it's important to not confuse Zoom room with Zoom meetings and webinars. Also, there is a growing groundswell, grassroots, whatever you want to call, a group of us that are trying to get together to petition and create almost like a white paper for Zoom to present to them about additional features we'd like to see, namely, can I get that feed completely clean? Alex, you talk about that all the time. But you've found that, what is your number? 102% gets rid of the
105. 105% creates a
105 cleans the display, but you are blowing it up. So, there's already a checkbox in the preferences to say don't show names. How about if it actually works and it cleans everything else off too?
Yeah, and the last thing we have with Zoom rooms is just a little connection. The irony of the whole thing is that the last little bit that's left is this little connection icon that we all see at the bottom corner. It's a connection icon that none of us care about because it's completely inaccurate and almost arbitrary. So the only thing that they're leaving up for us to see is something that we don't care about. So I think that's the more humorous part of this whole thing. Now, what I will say is that Zoom Rooms is worth researching because it's the killer feature. Like if you're doing online events, I went to Zoom Rooms because we were having pinning issues with the business accounts. and once we went through the trouble of getting the Zoom room set up, we have 14 of them. And, Grant has 1,000. so I think, so if you think of 14 is a lot, just wait until you do Grant's. Anyway, so, but it really is how you turn these events into events, is to figure out ways that you're going to use Zoom rooms to interact with those, and being able, like, for instance, just the ability, you have a remote presenter that has a, and we'll talk about this on Friday in more detail, but it's really the killer feature is Zoom rooms just transform your events. If you're going to do a broadcast with Zoom, it's really an amazing thing. Even if you're going to feed it, we do Zoom rooms and then we feed them back into a Zoom meeting or a Zoom webinar. It's a very convoluted way of doing it, but we can create very, very high quality events and high quality records, which is really important to us. Eric and then Paul, and then we'll move on.
Well, I just wanted to
quickly,
try
'cause
to
we're gonna-
summarize it in my very laymanish way. I'm understanding is that the Zoom room is primarily designed for a physical room that's outfitted with a bunch of gear and cameras and stuff to support a physical room. And now it's being adapted by taking those multiple outputs that might be available to a physical Zoom room and redirecting each of those outputs and switching them into another meeting or another event, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yep.
Okay.
And it's lethal.
Yeah, I just wanted to add Chris Fenwick or Preto or anybody else on the panel, next time you do a Zoom room, I'd like to throw me an invite if you wouldn't mind. I'd like to try some things out.
Absolutely.
Will do. And maybe today.
And the best thing to do with all of this stuff we were talking about over the weekend is to have, if you're doing Zoom rooms or doing any of these things, is to get people on this group to jump in and be part of the conversation, because you just have to see it working. It's hard to see it working without a lot of people. And we fortunately have a lot of people that can jump into those things. Next question.
Moving along to A. Mitchell's of Washington, the phantom that we all try to see in these Zoom meetings. With the portal's that's the Facebook portal, I assume, auto tracking feature, would this now be one of the best options as a main device for teachers with online classes, and then making the other device, whatever that teacher was using before they got the portal, a secondary for screen shares and meeting admin use?
It could be pretty useful for that. We were talking about this I'm not going to go on a tirade, but we're going to talk about this in general, that I don't think that hybrid events will ever work. But if you're going to try them, or if you're going to do the best you can, because the thing is, you don't need to track the teachers if they're just sitting in front of a webcam. But if you're going to put them in front of a bunch of in a classroom, I think the portal would probably do better than most other things that you could do without any operators. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I could see something like a science teacher or something like that has to stand up and move around to show off exhibits, having a tracking camera like that. I don't know if the portal would be the best solution, because I would probably want to see a screen that would be more static behind the camera, and then use something that would track to move separately. But it is a very interesting idea.
I think,
and of course, with the portal, you can't hook up a microphone to it.
I think cost effectively, I think it could be really interesting for the camera part, but you could have another participant that has a better mic and everything else. You just use it as the kind of roaming camera. Go ahead, Paul.
This is a portal. And if I move around, it should follow me. I don't know if it's going to do it. It's not doing. Yeah,
yep.
There it is. The only problem is they don't have a decent screen capture program. You've got all this garbage here. See in the lower part of my screen in the center?
I would literally just use it as a camera.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't use it for the audio or the presentation. I would do another computer for that. I wouldn't. This but as a camera that'll follow you around in Zoom, I think it's a pretty good solution. I don't think any of the other parts will work.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of junk there.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it just popped open a 10-inch one this morning in the meeting that we had before. And so the 8 and the 10-inch have the same camera, which unfortunately isn't nearly as good as the larger Portal Plus. So the Portal Plus that Paul is on has a really good camera for the price.
How much?
I mean, I think it's $229, I think, on sale right now. And that's basically a computer, plus a large display and a camera for $229. I mean, you really can't beat that. And it's boosting for teachers. It's boosting up the meeting. Well, anybody, it's boosting up your meeting to 720p. So, I mean, that's a lot of value for $229.
We got
I mean, I
two
can
of them
definitely
for
see
relatives for Christmas.
Yeah, I think that if you definitely want to present and walk around and do those types of things, it could be really useful, in that process. And it does a pretty good job of framing people. Like if you have another person walk into the room, it'll back up and frame them as well. So it's an interesting model in that respect. Next question.
Sorry, in the settings, you can actually tell it focus on one person or group. So if there's more than one person, it'll spread apart to frame up two people on the side of a table or something like that. So, and then there's manual as well. So you can just manually go in on the screen and say, focus just here. So in case you're doing some kind of lecture where you're leaving or turning around, I haven't seen what it does on back of heads, but that's been one of the tough parts of AI is what does it do when a teacher at a boardroom turns around and does it lose track and start hunting around?
I
don't think it's
turn
tracking
around and see if it tracks me.
I don't think it's tracking the head. I have a pretty, it's not tracking the head. It's tracking the body. So it's not building around the face. It's making a decision about the body. Anyway, next question.
Moving on to Diego Nunez of Barcelona, Spain. I'm on to help a local NGO, non-governmental organization, with a streaming event on YouTube. My fastest machine runs Windows 10. Guests will be on a Zoom meeting. I'll pin or spotlight them to my ATEM Mini. I'm building the show in OBS and Wirecast to test them both out. Which software would you go with?
John Preto. Put you on the spot there.
I was talking on Discord. What's the question? Sorry.
I got you off guard. If you're going to build a show on Windows 10 and you're going to build a show on Wirecast or OBS, which one would you choose?
Windows for OBS. Wirecast seems to run similar on both platforms.
Okay. Yep. But which one would you say on Windows do you think would be better?
OBS.
Jeffrey.
OBS. Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Well, it really depends on what you're doing. It sounds like he's hooking up the ATEM into OBS and Wirecast. I don't know what he's going to be doing with OBS or Wirecast. If you're talking about graphics, if you're talking about doing multiple streams out or stream record, then Wirecast would be your better option over OBS. But if you're just doing a straight hookup that'll just go straight to stream, keep it as cheap as possible, go OBS.
There you go. Next question.
Moving on to Rachel Ann Clifton. Can we discuss still more about file naming generally and a bit of management techniques? I got some thoughts on this, but I'm not sure where you want to take it.
Good, Bill.
Well, so if it's, and I wasn't part of any other discussion, so I'm going to take this from the beginning, but I just did about 2 years of talking to a lot of people in the Final Cut world because they gave us these keywords and I wanted to try to understand what's a good strategy. And I ran into a lot of, here's what we do in the television business and you should follow that. And here's what we do not in the television business. And I also talked to some people who were artistic types who blew my mind with different strategies for naming files. So I think there's a divide between the structured people and the I just want to make file names work how I want them to work, not in an organization where you have to have standards. That said, some basics like understanding how leading spaces work for filtering names in databases and things become very important, and I would pay attention to that as you're figuring out how you want to name things.
All right, go ahead, Raphael.
The one thing that should be obvious is that in order for the files to be easily movable from platform to platform, I would recommend avoiding like spaces and stuff in the names because you will always get trouble.
Yeah, anybody who's worked in Unix or Linux, if you put a space in the name, they'll want to kill you. There's a whole bunch of percent, 20%, 20%, 20%, like hidden everywhere, that you're not seeing that we have to deal with when we're doing greps and all kinds of other stuff. So, for me, the other thing to, only one period, and that is before the suffix, and then after that, we use underscores a lot between stuff. I tend not to use when I have enough time to back up and build a naming convention for a show, which I'm doing right now. I tend not to use full words because they just take a lot of time and they create different lengths. So I do most general to most specific, and 3 to 5 characters per group, but they're always the same. So the first group of them will always be the same number of characters, because then I can do greps that say, go over 8 characters and tell me what the next 4 characters are. I don't have to, it's easier to write the search process. And so I tend to not want the number of characters to change in my naming conventions. And then and we kind of build a set of rules about what we know we're going to use, and then rules about how we're going to get to the next. If you're going to make something up, this is what you want. This is how you want to do it. And I didn't make that naming convention up. That's at least when I was there, that was the ILM naming conventions. That's like how you did stuff so that big machines could go around and grab stuff and move it around. Sky, and then Eric, and then Mickey.
I'd love if you could post that, because as Bill was talking, if you're working by yourself, call it whatever you want. But if you're working to hand something off, you need a structure or a process, and often you will need to separate it between audio files, video files, and graphic files. That's the 3 basics, and then text. Go ahead.
If I'm doing it a lot, then I usually have something set. Like when I was at ILM, I would have a folder structure that was a folder structure for a shot.
Yes, please.
And I would just right click and go down, right click as a service, and just say, build the photo structure, and the whole structure would just appear. I didn't have to build it. It would just appear as like, this is the structure that I have for these shots, And so I don't have that as much now, because more of my stuff's bespoke, but you want to think about that folder structure as well. It's not just whether you want to work with other people, it's whether you want to go back and actually get to it again, a year later.
Yeah.
Eric, and then Mickey.
Discipline.
Well, it's, from my perspective, it's kind of depends on how you're going to manage that file. If you are actually cataloging it somewhere in some kind of utility to catalog the files, then I think the metadata that catalog introduces for application to those files is the thing that you need to be thinking about. Now, if you're talking about a file system in which you're going to be visiting with the Finder or the Explorer in Windows or something like that, more important is what is your folder structure and how that comes up. And when I talk to people about naming conventions for files in that scenario, I try to get them to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in terms of the organization and display of a file when you visit the folder by preceding it with a date, a European type date that's, like 2020 11/23, and then an underscore, and then it's always automatically sorted by the date of it, no matter what the time setting is set for the sorting. That's just my
I try to think about it. I mean, it depends on whether the date is important or not for me. I don't always put the dates in, because sometimes I don't want it to sort that way. And then I definitely don't put it, well, I tend not to put it in the beginning. The date tends to be something I put at the end. Mickey?
Yeah, just on the same topic, I'm a big fan of dates as opposed to version numbers. I mean, that could be a personal thing, just because version numbers, you don't know if it's going to end in version 9 or if it's going to end in version 90. So I want to be able to predict the number of characters that I'll have there. So with the date, it's constant, and with dates always, like as Eric mentioned, year, month, date, like not any other way around. Please, never, please.
Because again, it searches better when you stack it up. It'll search all the years, then the months, then the days. If you do it that way, if you do it any other way, it causes mass chaos. Chris, and then Courtney.
I was going to say one other thing is that in a general sense, you kind of want to decide whether or not you want to organize things into buckets of jobs, or some people like to do buckets of file types. And I don't understand that at all, because it's really about the job. And over the years, I've had massive headbutts with different people over that. And in virtually every case, eventually they come around, they go, yeah, you were right.
I mean, anytime anybody who's gone back for more than a couple times to something that they haven't touched for a year or two will wish that they did it by job. It's, no matter how with shared resources or anything else, you just really wish you had collected all that into one place, because you're just searching around trying to figure out where that texture file is, or where that font is, or whatever, and you lose so much time. Then you realize that I just could have just put that all in the same drive. Courtney?
And a couple of things that haven't been covered yet is be careful. Depends on the type of files you're talking about. Audio files, you have to be careful about some delimiters because some delimiters are used to denote a channel number. When broadcast wave poly files are divided into mono, they use an underscore and then a number for the track number or channel number. And then if you want to combine those back in, the software uses that underscore and that number to determine the position when it combines it back. The other thing is don't get too wordy, because there's a limit, at least in Windows. I'm not sure how the Mac handles it, but there's a 256 character limit on the file and path name in most programs. And if you've got nested folders, like first folder's name, this is the shot we did on Monday, folder 2 under that is, camera 3's outtakes, and, you end up with 4 or 5 nested folders and then a really long file name. You'll run over that 256 character limit and things won't show up.
I tend to remove vowels and then I shorten it. Again, I try to make every term 3 to 5 letters.
Try and make it as succinct as possible. That's my rule.
Absolutely. Jason and then Doug.
Okay, I'm not at all surprised that this group has a lot of really good opinions about file naming conventions. I'll throw my 2 cents in without repeating any. I use Text Expander for file naming, especially if I just build in series of dates. Again, for example, year, month, day. Do not forget your trailing zeros on the days, 01, 02, 03, because if you're sorting ascending or descending, it will come out canonically correct, which is what matters. Also, for folders, I use AppleScript to create the folder structure and then Hazel to discipline those folders down. And if you're not familiar with Hazel, it's a fantastic little Mac app.
It's great. Great. Doug and then Stuart, then Mickey.
Yeah, I keep my files exactly like some of you guys have said, and I can actually show you. So most of my files are online all the time. So I have them by year, and then inside I have the year dot 05, like Jason said, and then the day, a space, a dash, a space, and then the project name, and then in each folder. Every folder is set up the same. So animations are in one folder, audio is in another folder, DVD stuff is in another, if you believe that we still make DVDs. Exported videos are here. The video editing, I use Premiere, so they always have a bunch of crazy folders that they create. So that's all together. And I do have different versions if I do have to do a save as, or with Adobe, when you update, sometimes they don't like the old file name. But every folder is exactly the same way, and it lines up when you name it this way. So if I know the name of something or the date that I actually did it on, it's really easy to find. And I'm a digital hoarder.
Yep. Go ahead. I lost track of what happened here because people have been moving. People left. I think somebody left, and now my order is out of whack here. Bill and then Stuart.
This is going to scare people, but since I moved to Final Cut 10, I don't use folders at all. That's because there's a database built into it, and I operate it differently. I will say that when I've been talking to documentarians, somebody who's working on the same project for maybe 3 or 5 years, they have a different way of thinking about organization than somebody who's doing corporate. Like when I'm doing my corporate work, the kind of thing that Alex is talking about with making sure that each job has its own bucket and that I can find by job is important, where the documentarian could not care. It's one job over the course of years. So what they're interested in is being able to granularly dig down to find what they need when you want. And that is why I've gone completely away from folders. I put everything in a bucket and I use the visual PyCon searches and the little keyword things to type in a couple of things and then visually go to it, because I don't want to lose visual connection with the material to come out to a text-based world to need to go in and find things. That's too confusing for me now.
Yep. Stuart and then Mickey, and then we'll move on.
Luxury. You young whippersnappers. Back in my day of Windows 3.1, we had 8 bits, a dot, and 3 bits, and that was it for naming. You need to be more succinct, everyone.
Yeah.
Your
8
files
bits
will
is only
search
one
faster
character,
if your
though.
names are shorter. What was
Go
that,
ahead,
Courtney?
I said 8 bits is only one character. You mean 8 characters?
8 characters. Go ahead, Mickey, and then we're gonna move on.
The joke worked.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what I tell the other engineers that I work with is how you name and organize your files. Like, you should, if ever like you receive a drive that is organized the same way, just dumped on you without any clue what's in it, that's how you like. You should name your files how you expect that drive to be named. Like, do unto others.
Do unto
what's the
others.
saying? Yeah, do unto
Yeah.
others what you want others to do unto
Yeah,
you. Essentially.
exactly. Next question.
Moving along, we're at Robert Gates of New York. I have an ATEM Mini Pro and plan on doing webcasting, Zoom events, team events, and so forth. Looking for a 3-camera setup for my desk. Trying to determine a good lens and camera to use. Was considering a Blackmagic Micro. Any recommendations that will work well with the ATEM Mini Pro?
Well, it sounds like now that the micro, there's a converter that will go HDMI to SDI and SDI to HDMI, so you can shade the micros, from there. So you could theoretically use the micros at that point as an overhead camera. You can also mix and match at this point. If those, I haven't used those converters yet, but they look optimistic. And so being able to, again, once you have an ATEM Mini or an ATEM in general, for me, that usually means I'm buying Blackmagic cameras so that I can shade them and check focus and change zoom. And so one thing to think about is if you have a document camera or an object camera, you want to be looking for power iOS or, they basically powered zooms. Panasonic makes a couple. They're not as good in low light as other things, but you can control the zoom and the focus. Think about having a camera like that for if you're going to show off objects, because you can zoom in, zoom out, that type of thing. It's pretty useful. And so those are the things to think about there. Again, it just depends on your budget at that point about whether you get, the micros or the 4Ks or 6Ks. But you'll end up, if you actually get serious, you'll end up getting rid of all the cameras that you had that weren't Blackmagic cameras within a year. Like if you actually start doing this because you really want to have that camera control, to be able to shade the camera, check focuses, do other things. You can start with other cameras, but if you use it a lot, you're going to end up with something that you can control because it's kind of the key to the whole operation. Like it just makes everything run better to have that camera control. Any other comments there? Yeah, go ahead, John, and then Jason.
I'll be on Studio C with my Blackmagic Micro, and I spend as much on the lens than I did for the camera, but you'll get an idea of how it
as
looks.
you do, as we do. Yeah, exactly. Jason.
I really like the Blackmagic 4K, and I also like the 6K. Those adapters that you're referring to, I don't believe that they exist yet. I pre-ordered them day and date of announcement. But for those of you who think what Alex is saying is nuts, it's absolutely true. I replaced, I don't even know how many cameras in the first year because the system was so robust and so uniform. Like uniformity is what matters when you're switching between cameras.
And I spent a lot of time, before this, I spent a lot of time with lots and lots and lots of camcorders and other things that I used to have a whole bunch of, I think they were G20s or whatever that were, or HV40s. There's a Canon 10 years ago. And I had, 8 of them. And so I was constantly moving them around. And the amount of time I spent running up there and moving things around or trying to get a length to work or do all those other things. That's why it's all that history that I just go. And then when you get used to the fact that, I can change the focus or lighting or whatever, focus or exposure or even color remotely, when you know what the pane looks like on the other side of that, that eventually you're just going to want to get to a place where it works. Next question.
Greg Gibson as the first of 2 that were voted highly. Organizations that are doing virtual events well are seeing larger audiences than ever before. What, if anything, is to be gained from a return to in-person gatherings?
There's definitely, I think that in-person is going to return. I don't think that it's going to go away. I don't think the budgets will be, I think that number one is I think it could be a long time before we see 10,000 people or 5,000 people in a room. I think that, the vaccinations are all starting and everything else, but I think you're still talking about another year, maybe 2, before you see these big gatherings again. Now you may see smaller gatherings, and I think that those make a lot of sense. There's a lot of things that do make sense. I work on events where we stream we stream segments of them, but it's a bunch of executives and you're paying a lot of money per person to take care of them. Thousands of dollars per person is, to make sure that they're wined and dined because they're buying ads or they're buying something else. And I think that kind of, process, I think, will continue. I think there's definitely people want to come back to concerts and go back to sports arenas. There's an energy there. So I don't think that these are, I don't think that part's going away. What I do think is that as the online events get better, and they're getting better faster. I mean, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars being invested right now by Zoom and all their competitors, because they're all fighting against each other to kind of jostle for this. These events are going to get a lot better over the next year. If you look at where we were 8 months ago and where we are now, it's a big jump. Give it another 8 months or another 16 months, and it'll be 2 more big jumps, probably bigger than the last ones. It's not a matter of whether salespeople like to go to event conferences. It's a matter of whether the CFO wants to pay for it. Just be clear. Like, it doesn't. So when that number doesn't pencil out anymore, it's not going to matter what people think. It's going to matter of, is the ROI there for the online events? And I will say that a lot of online events run poorly. Their ROI isn't necessarily there. But when we're starting to see a lot of our clients, when we pull off a great event, they're like, oh, I don't know if we go back to, and right now we're still trying to reproduce the physical event inside the virtual events. That's like having a bunch of baseball players on one side and trying to play football against, the Steelers or the Ravens, then just getting crushed, but once they start actually, as these virtual events start to take off, and as you start to see the scale, I don't know how they fit back into physical events. You're so used to bringing people in from all over the world. Like this event that we're doing every morning is not reproducible physically. Like, this is not, you can't do this in physical terms. We can't meet every day with people on every continent, and so the thing is that it's not going to fit back in. And so there's going to be a whole, I think there's, I think that physical events will drop, my guess is, by 60 to 70%. When we get out of this, there'll just be 60 to 70% less events that are physical. And, obviously that'll get filled in by virtual events. And I think that so the venues will still be there. There'll still be big events, but there'll just be a lot less of them because they just don't pencil out anymore. Stuart and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, there's 3 things to be gained from returning to in person. One is the emotional connection with a performer and the audience. The other is the amount of money that the performer makes from the audience. The third is actually in smaller one-on-one meetings, especially expensive business deals, where you can tell a lot about whether a person is being honest in a deal by their body language. And you can't often tell that across Zoom because we're cutting off half of our bodies. So you don't get to see that extra information that helps you make a decision.
I also think, I will say that from the monetization perspective, I think that monetization perspective will turn corners. It'll turn a corner sometime next year where, a lot of these events, people will pay less to go to the event and the organizer will make more. And that's already happening. Some of our clients are making more money now with their event activations than they were. It's not so much they're making more money, they're making more profit. The event costs less to activate, and they're, so the profit that they're making is higher than it was before. Because if you think about the cost of doing a stadium event, it's not trivial. Or a big event, it's not, there's a lot of costs involved. And so again, in the ham-fisted kind of painful way that we've been doing virtual events up until now, that doesn't always pencil out. But as the events get more efficient, as people are learning what we're learning and thinking out how to really engage people, I think we're going to see a steady, growth of people really making money at doing this. Jeffrey, and then Raphael.
There's still one factor here, and it kind of crosses over to Greg's other question, which is basically a continuation of this question, and that is the insurance factor. There's too much risk right now, and one of the big things that South by Southwest really contemplated on because of their cancellation was because of the fact they didn't have the insurance to cover all of these events getting canceled and people had problems. Now you bring people into a event and you can say everything you can go down the list and say, you can't sue us, you can't sue us, you can't sue us, you can't sue us. And then they're just going to get lawsuit after lawsuit if they do end up getting something that that causes problems. So that's going to be the I think the biggest factor in whether people come back to a big gathering like that.
The other thing is that we've been working with, a variety of organizations as we do this. You're going to start hearing. So there's a lot of organizations that would like, from an environmental perspective, would prefer for events not to come back. They have a huge environmental impact. You can expect that environmental organizations are going to ask corporations to publish their carbon footprint for their event. That's a conversation that is swirling around right now, is that we've all figured out how to stop, and do something else. Let's keep it from starting again. And one of the ways you keep starting again, if you force Salesforce to publish the carbon footprint for 150,000 people coming to, that's their flights, the hotels, the taxis, everything. And the environmental groups are basically like, either you publish it or we will. We'll just, conservatively guess how much that all is going to take, and we'll publish those out. And a lot of corporations like Apple and Google and Facebook and Salesforce are not going to want those numbers out there. They're not going to want, carbon footprints. It goes against what they're, a lot of the rest of their corporate communications. And so I think that, the other thing, the weight that's going to lean on this is a lot of organizations trying to stop it from going back, because they see it as a big piece of the carbon piece of everyone flying around. So, obviously we've seen a lot of the trajectory has changed dramatically in the last year. And so they're trying to figure out how to keep it going that direction. Raphael, and then we're going to move on.
Well, I'm involved in the CCC Congress, and this year, which is like a 5,000 people security conference, and this year they decided to go totally online, obviously, and they're selling tickets for €0. The only thing that they sell in the store is T-shirts and stuff that they would mail to people.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the again, for a lot of these organizations, they were charging because they cost them to do the event, and so they they can charge a much lower number, or they charge nothing because it doesn't cost them the same amount to do it. Now, I think that they should spend the same amount of money they spent before, and then make the event amazing, as opposed to or spend half of what they spent before and make it amazing, rather than trying to cut it down to the bone. We see a lot of that. We mostly turn those jobs down. Next question.
Moving along to the other Greg question, Greg Gibson question. Rumors of a vaccine arrival are rampant this week. Many are anticipating return to some level of in-person events late next year. Clients are requesting proposals on transitioning to events that mix virtual and in-person. What do you see as the next steps in the evolution?
I've been talking about this a lot since Saturday. I've been doing mixed events for 15 years. They don't work. If you want to do a mixed event, what you should do is you should have physical things that people do together, and then you should have events that are largely driven towards the online audience, but don't try to do both in the same room. Really have it be something that is, there's a physical, we are talking to some folks about this as well, but there's a physical element to it, but you really want everyone to be back on a screen if you want to incorporate the larger online audience. And we'll see. The hard part is people are looking for proposals because people are desperate to go back to the physical thing that they know, because they haven't figured out the virtual. You just gotta make sure we don't know when this is going to end. I mean, we need to stop. There's some point where you have to stop looking out for the ship to come in. We really don't know when this is going to end. There's a lot of epidemiologists that say it may never end. It may take 3 to 5 years. So, the desperate look at this ending immediately is, it may, but there's just as equal chance that it could last 2 or 3 more years, if not the rest of our lives. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind when you make those plans. I wouldn't do it until I wouldn't start planning physical events until I saw physical events. And I would get really good at virtual events until then. Brian, and then Grant.
Yeah, I really agree with what Alex feels about the whole mixing a live event and a virtual event and trying to do some sort of dual purpose event. To me, the analogy is I've dealt with live events and broadcast events for decades, and the biggest mistake that the mid-level and less players make is trying to have a live event that they also broadcast. And there's a reason why at the highest levels they don't do that. The Grammys are a television show with a bunch of people there as props. It's not a live show. It's a television show.
Right.
And that's why it works, because they approach it as a television show, and the people that are there in the audience are completely secondary, and consequently it totally works. Or you can have a concert, and it's for the people that are in the audience, and there's a maybe we stream it, or maybe we do a film of it and we edit it later and we try to put something, but it's mostly for the people that are there. As soon as we try to do something, every time I've had a client that's, I ask the question, is this a broadcast event or is this a live event? Because you're telling me that there's going to be an audience, but that you want to make a TV show out of it. And they say, well, it's both. My rate goes up is what happens. And because I don't want to be there, because it never works. And this is where we're in the same place. You really have to be doing a virtual event, which maybe has a reasonable in-person presence, but they're not the emphasis. That's not the emphasis for the event. Or you go in the completely opposite direction, which has been the pattern that we've seen for forever, which is we have a live event and we throw up a couple of cameras and we stick them into a laptop and we stream it out and nobody watches it. But yeah, I agree with Alex, and that's from a client education standpoint. I think one of our biggest challenges for those of us who are figuring out how to do this in a really high quality way is how do we educate them to help them understand that if you're going to spend the money, do it in a have your live event when you can, the way that you can have it, and then have your virtual event and spend your money on that and leverage that as a completely different, equally as valuable, if not more valuable process.
And, the thing that we talk about with a lot of our clients over and over and over again is just remember that when you do a physical event, you are cutting out somewhere between 85 and 99.99% of your audience. The people that are interested, like you're cutting them out or giving them lesser than because they can't make it. They can't afford it. They can't take the time off, or they're in another continent. They can't get the visa. They can't get, there's all these other things that you do that you're cutting them out of a potential market, because you want to have a physical event, and so for the people who get there, it's great, kind of, but like, for instance, tracks. Like, why do we have tracks anymore? Like, when people ask me, like, I want to do 6 tracks at the same time, and I'm always like, why would you do that? Like, why would you make people choose? We did that because we were constrained by time and space. Our virtual events are not constrained by time and space. And it gives us an enormous amount of flexibility and challenges, but a lot of flexibility, a lot more than physical events. Grant, and then Jason, and then Paul, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges for me is actually when you can convince a client to make a change, but they only go so far,
right.
And so we've had it where they've got a yearly 5-day meeting, and they have all these workshops, and then they have all these other little seminars that happen. And I've got one it's great. They've decided, okay, yeah, let's do pre-recorded, and then let's do a live panel discussion. It's like, that's awesome. So, we got that far. And then they say, okay, yeah, so we've got 30 of those seminars to do.
Right.
And they're all going to happen in a 3-day time period. So now you've got to manage how do people access all of that on-demand content, and then how do they find the panel discussion? And I'm just like, if only we could do this all year round. You could just have one every couple of weeks, and it'd be super easy. Here's the pre-recorded content. You've got a week to watch it, and then come together for the panel discussion. And then in another 2 weeks, we've got another one.
Well, and the advantage of that, what we see, we've had a couple clients that we're going to do a 3-day event, and I try to explain to them, you're going to lose 60% of your audience over 3 days. Like they'll all from whoever starts at the beginning, there'll be 40% of left at the end because it's just too much, for them to do that. When we've got a couple of them to spread it out, take that 3-day event, spread it out over a month, right? They oftentimes, if it's open to the public, will have twice as many viewers at the end as they had at the beginning because people were able to share it and they were able to talk about how great it was and they're able to tell their friends and they get people engaged. And so you actually have way more impact by spreading it out. And the other thing is that you train your audience on how this works. The reason this works, what we do, is because everyone has learned how to do it. And we've gotten through the troubles of, I don't understand my audio and I don't understand how we're supposed to ask questions and what we're supposed to go to and everything else. But when you only do one event a year or one event a quarter, you have to ramp. All of that happens. That wetware all happens at one time. You've got 400 people and 15% of them are having trouble. And 15% of 400 is a lot of people, that are upset and they're frustrated and they're emailing the organizers and tweeting out how screwed up this is and everything else. And so, but if you do it ongoing, you can have a tentpole event, but you want to have ongoing events so that the audience, the majority of the audience, you're flattening the curve. The majority of the audience knows how to handle it when they go through that process. Jason and then Paul, and then we'll move on.
I don't blame clients for asking. Companies, including mine, like to hedge their bets. It does, however, matter quite a bit that if you're being hired as an expert, to be listened to as an expert because they haven't thought it all the way through. Because we don't know about the time frame for vaccines, they basically just think, well, let's just ask for all of it because more is better, right? And in this case, better is better.
Well, and again, I tell clients that, and then they say, okay, I still want to do it this way, and I'm like, okay, sure. And again, when I get it, I will do everything I can to try to crack the puzzle. Like maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I can figure this out, and I'm going to try to crack it this time, and we'll figure out a new way to do it that we hadn't figured out before. And we always it gets better. Every event that I do is a little better than the last one, and every physical event or hybrid event we do is better than the last one. We keep on adding things to it, but it's an opportunity for me to learn. But I just haven't gotten there yet. I've done a lot of them. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just wondering how South by Southwest, which has always been a total physical event, is going to come off this year. They've always failed at the virtual part of their event. And instead of spending thousands of dollars and getting a thing you wear around your neck and you walk all over the city, it's $150. And I always see Jeffrey Powers there on 6th Street, and you bump into people. I just wonder how they're going to replicate that serendipity that you have when you go to a conference.
It's one of the things we're starting to experiment with the little morning pre and post shows that I'm playing with, is giving people an opportunity to kind of mill around. And what I do think that I think would be really interesting is for Zoom to be able to let people build ad hoc breakout rooms. So I can say, hey, I want to have a conversation with Grant and Sky, click on them, invite them, and then boom, we just disappear and go into something. I think that would revolutionize how these meetings look, because it would give you that hallway, the opportunity to have a hallway conversation, on your own. There's some technical and security challenges there, but I think that if Zoom could figure it out, I think it'd be pretty interesting as far as that kind of more, because you could be at a show, a little concert, and see someone, let's go talk, or whatever. Go ahead, Bill.
I was really impressed with.
Yeah, good.
My niece was involved with Hardly Strictly Brew Glass in San Francisco, and I was really fascinated by how they did it. I think they did it really well, and part of it was that they had a narrative thread that they created. A couple of a wandering guitar player and somebody coming across the event and going to talk about aspects of where the event came from. So there was a little history. Then they ran into different performance places around the park, and then they went, this was not live, they went to, they shot in various cities. They shot in the Ryman Auditorium for some of those seminal musicians like Emmylou Harris. And it was a combination of a concert and a story and a history lesson that I thought they did beautifully. And that to me was kind of an eye-opener. It's a new kind of show that took the strengths of all of these things and combined them into a compelling presentation.
I think that the challenge really is that I watched 10 minutes of it. Like without a conversation, without being engaged, without having it. I was like, oh, this looks cool. I like bluegrass. And I watched 10 minutes of it. I skipped around a little bit and then I moved on, and maybe I watched one whole song. The thing is that I do think, I know you're not going to be surprised given what we do every morning. I think conversation is a big piece of this. And I think that everyone doing these kind of pre-recorded, we're going to put a bunch of stuff up, using up my live time, my real time attention to do that. Like I want to watch that while I'm in, doing something else or listen to it or whatever I'm going to do. But I don't want to use up my live time to watch something that's been pre-recorded. I'm just noticing that I just completely just step away from that. And maybe it's just me, but I skip through things to research them, like the Taylor Swift one. I skipped through it, watch pieces of it to kind of figure out what she's doing. But I didn't feel compelled to watch the whole thing. And I think that's the challenge for artists. We're talking a lot about for artists, and the VOD. I don't know how many people really want to watch. There are some, but I don't know how many people really want to watch pre-recorded stuff. For concerts. Concerts it's a passive experience. It's not what you get when you're there. Next question. We're going to keep moving. We're taking all these questions a little too long, so I'm going to start moving a little faster.
Okay, Stuart Fairweather of Melbourne and the panel. Alex's thoughts on the announcement of the M1 Mini running Windows 10 ARM over the weekend.
More power to them if they can keep it running. Like I think that anytime you're doing some kind of hack into it that Apple doesn't want you to do, like I wouldn't build anything on that. Like it's cool, but they'll just close up the next rev of the OS will close it up. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Jason.
I thought about, Apple will probably patch it to close it, but Apple have also got an opportunity there that if it runs better on an Apple M1 than it runs on any of the Windows ARM machines, they could literally use that in their marketing and say, hey, yes, you can run Windows on our machine. It'll run better than on Windows.
I just don't think that they're going to care. Like that, what Apple wants is a controlled environment that they can control the quality of the experience. I really don't think it's about money. I don't think it's about anything else. I think they just want to control the experience, and they want it to be, like a unified process. And so, and opening gaps is not something that Apple does. So I think that I doubt it'll. I mean, it'll again. It's cool from it's cool from a theoretical perspective, and that someone figured it out. But there's no there. Jason, Mickey, and Courtney, and then we'll move on. I'm going to kind of try to limit it to like 4 people for each answer because we're going really long. Go ahead, Jason.
I can't help but mentioning, for those who have never tried Windows on ARM, it's truly an awful experience. Like, it is impressively bad. So nobody cares.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, Apple's all about the ecosystem, and guess what? Other products make more money than the Macs, iPhones, and iPads. So if they don't want people, they want to keep people in the ecosystem, so that people buy other Apple products.
Well, and it's also I think it's just a matter of a unified experience, and I just don't think that they're gonna. I don't know if I really don't know if it's a marketing thing. I mean, like a money thing as much as just you connect the brand to to quality and integration and everything else, and opening any kind of hack opens up more security holes, whether even if it's sitting outside of it. They're just going to use that as a way to tie the security holes down. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I take a little different opinion. I think one of the reasons they moved to the Intel platform was to be able to incorporate the Windows world, because they didn't have enough market penetration.
I agree with you there.
Business world was on Intel. And so by creating a boot camp, it allowed people to have it both ways. That way they could sell more Macs into the business world, because they could use those custom Windows environment, custom written software that corporations run off of on their Mac if they needed to. And
I agree with you. They did that when they needed them. They just don't need them anymore.
Well, they still don't have anything more than 10% market penetration worldwide, but their computer platform, not including iPhones, the phone market. But the other thing is Windows RT. Now, Windows tried ARM-based computing, Windows RT, and it was a miserable failure because of that specific thing. It wasn't compatible with the rest of the Windows, software. And you could only run limited numbers of software on it, and that's why it failed.
I just don't think that Apple, they don't need a bigger percentage of the market to make good money from the Macs. The Mac is such a small percentage of their income. so it's, they can, and I think I don't think they're trying to take all of that market. I do think they're going to double their market share from 6.5 to 13 to 15% in the next 2 or 3 years, because the cheapest, most powerful computer you can get right now is an Apple. And I think that when we saw John Hodgman come on, that's a preview to an ad campaign. I'm going to guess it's going to be brutal. Jeffrey, 30 seconds.
Really quick, the only reason why you'd want to have Windows on a Mac is to test on your enterprise level of operation. And if Fusion or Parallels works just as well as doing a boot camp, why would you want a boot camp?
Next question.
Moving on to Jonas Tatel of Reutlingen. Will there be a Desktop Mukana app with Zoom in the center, basically a skinned Zoom?
You can't do that. Not that I know of right now. We're looking at other ways. We're looking at Zaps and so on and so forth to kind of incorporate it, but I don't think that there's a way right now to wrap Zoom. The Zoom kind of controls that part of it. You know, Jason and then Grant.
My understanding is that would completely violate TOS.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because they've got Zoom video, which kind of opens up what you can do. You can really use the infrastructure of Zoom, but you can use it however you wish. And so I was going to mention that before, Alex, when you were talking about the potential of a couple or two or three that wanted to break off in their own room. I think there's some possibility of developers kind of creating something that can do that. It's kind of WebRTC, but within the Zoom infrastructure. Right. The second thing I'd just mention as well is that the term Zaps seems to have disappeared. Fredo,
right
and
when
I were talking about that.
There was right after they got sued for the name.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So the name I'm using Zaps because I don't have another name for it, but they got sued by Zapier, who makes plugins, and they were like, "Hey, that's really close to our name." So, and I found it confusing. So I think there is market confusion around it. So anyway, next question.
Moving on to Jeffrey Reyes in the Bronx, New York. Hi, Alex. Wanted to update on your vMix production and if that was going well for you.
Almost immediately we started testing it and then dropped it. It was so we have a bunch of PCs, we're just using them with Zoom. A lot of that had to do with the fact that we just found almost immediately that for when we were trying to bring people in, WebRTC on its own doesn't navigate complex networks super well, and that the need to go into a browser to define what camera and what mic people are going to use was a heavy lift when they all know Zoom. And once we were able to get 720 and then 1080, as soon as we got 1080p out of Zoom, there wasn't really a compelling reason to go back to that, because at first we were getting really low resolutions. Once we got 1080p on point-to-points, we kind of felt like we had what we needed, out of that system. And we actually get more out of Zoom because we're doing a lot of corporate stuff where we were doing a lot of political stuff that people would want to do a presentation, and the ability to get both the ability to get both the presentation and the person out of the same connection is pretty compelling. And so anyway, it just didn't add up. There was the reason we wanted to do it was to build complex returns back to them over vMix using the super sources that are within the vMix. And we haven't ended up using that as much as we thought. And I decided that I'd still rather build it in hardware just to make sure it's stable. So we haven't used it. I think that if vMix built its own app, if people built their own apps and didn't use WebRTC, might use the WebRTC platform and do what Zoom does. Zoom sits on WebRTC, and then they put a bunch of special sauce, secret sauce on top of it. And by owning both ends of it, they create a much more stable connection than WebRTC, and one that can navigate networks better, gives me back incredible amounts of information, probably too much, too much information if you go into the stats. I'm not a big, I was excited about WebRTC, but I've really come to believe currently that you would need to build your own app to get the same level of quality and stability and ease of use that we get from Zoom. So that's kind of where we're at on vMix. Next question.
Jonas Tatel of Reutlingen. Why do you keep mentioning that you should join Zoom just to go over to Mukana? Wouldn't it make more sense to send everybody directly to Mukana?
Eventually. Eventually that would make sense. We kind of want them to go through that process right now, just because I don't want to post Mukana links on YouTube because I kind of see it as a cesspool. So I think that we were creating a couple steps for people to get to, to protect our system from YouTubers. So if you're watching on YouTube, sorry about that. But it's not you, but it's people that you see. If you go up to the comments on YouTube, even for our show, you'll see a handful of not nice comments that pop up every once in a while, and I just go, well, let's just make it. Let's not publish it there just yet. So we're on our way. We're building up a bunch of tools on the back end to make sure that we're ready for that. But it's YouTube is not. There's a reason I don't do comments in YouTube, Jason.
Yeah, just a quick thought on systems design in business. I get a lot of requests on Yelp for what I do, and 9 times out of 10, it's complete garbage. In fact, I'd say 49 out of 50 times, it's complete garbage. I mean, a small barrier to entry makes a big difference. That's my point.
There's some point where I'm going to open it up a bit more. I just want to make sure that we're ready for that and the systems are ready for that and everything else. And in the meantime, I'm just more interested in creating a quality community as opposed to quantity. So, I like barriers to entry. I kind of like it to be a speakeasy. You open this up and then you open this up and then you open this up. And you have, the as JJ Abrams would say, it's the box inside of the box. So now people know that if they show up at 5, they can all talk to each other. I'm not even there. And if they stay a little longer, they can, but I'm not, we put that on the email, but I'm not putting that on Twitter. Next question.
Yeah, getting through the doorman is a big part of the club. Paul King of Northern Virginia says, is there a workaround to get 720p on a Zoom webinar if you're not already on a business plan?
You can't get 720p. I can't get 720p and I'm paying for it. I'm paying a lot across many platforms and I can't get 720p for the participants, for the attendees. Not that I'm bitter. But I don't, it's still 640 by 360 for the attendees. It's frustrating. Go ahead, Jason.
I will just say, no, first you need to pay them something, but advocate, just ask, be nice.
Yeah, I mean,
and ask and talk to them.
If we stop using webinar, it's going to be because I can't get that resolution sorted out. Like if we move I have ideas of how to do that. But if there's a point where I go, hey, we're not doing the webinar anymore for everyone. We're just going to do it we're just going to do a meeting for the hosts. And then we're going to broadcast it out to everyone. The reason that we're doing that is because I can't figure out why someone won't give me 1080p, and I'll just be like, I can solve it that way. So I'm working on that system because I keep on making requests in different places, and I haven't gotten a 1080p yet. So I'm by the end of the year, I'll either have 1080p figured out, or we'll probably move to something else. I mean, I'll do it in some other way because it's not working. Jeffrey.
I'm curious now that Portal has the ability to, once you join with a Portal, you can get 720p.
It
I wonder
updates
if that's the same case on the.
It
Yeah, but not the webinar.
No, the webinar attendees are still getting 640 by 360.
Would it be more of a situation where the person that joined gets 720, but everybody else would get 360? You could just get them all Portals.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we have too many people going in and out to do that. So it's just. So anyway, it's frustrating, So anyway, but I'll either figure it out or I'll figure out a way around it. One of the others.
I'll test my idea. I'll test my idea when I get my Portal tomorrow.
Yep. Go ahead, Bill. Next question.
Next question, Hasmek from Cape Town, and one of the most frequent flyers here. I use the ATEM for Zoom meetings when I need multi-camera or to cut graphics or lower thirds. Alex mentions Blackmagic Web Presenter frequently. Where does this device fit in, and when would I use it with or without the ATEM?
Go ahead, Jason.
I love the Web Presenter. It fits in as an aux send for video. That's the best way I can put it. It has 2 inputs. It will take up to 4K 60, turn it in and turn it around to 720. It's supposed to be 720 60. I've never seen it go past 720 30, at least on Mac OS. And it gives you an immediate turnaround and out. So really what it is an aux send for video. What do you think, Alex?
It's mostly if you don't have an ATEM Mini, you use it as the kind of the easy way to just kind of push something in. It's only 720, it's not 1080. It is slightly more compatible. So there are, we have trouble with the ATEM Minis specifically. I've had it on and off not work with BlueJeans, WebEx, and Chime, which nothing really works with Chime. So in those senses, they're a little bit more sensitive. The 1080p doesn't always work. You can't see the switcher. The web presenter looks like a web camera, period. Like it is a web camera, a standard web camera. If you open up webcam settings, it'll try to control it. It doesn't do anything. But the point is it really looks like a webcam to the computer. And that means that no matter what computer you plug it into, it just works. In the sense that, and with an ATEM Mini, it doesn't work 100% of the time. It works 90% of the time. But and if you don't have an ATEM Mini, the web presenter just, is great. It also has an SDI input and an HDMI input, and you can click between the two. So you can just click, if you just want a quick presentation tool that you can click between your presentation and the web presenter will do that for you. And again, it can take 4K as well. So it can take a 4K signal and turn it down into a webcam at 720. So it's got a couple other features in it that the ATEM Mini doesn't. But generally, if you had an ATEM Mini, I probably wouldn't get a web presenter. If I carry it around, so I don't necessarily take the ATEM Mini to traveling with me as much, although I'm going to take it on my next little trip. But the web presenter is something I usually pack. Jason, and then Jeff, and then Courtney.
Well, and for those who think that you can really tell a difference in a pipeline, I just switched from the ATEM Mini to the web presenter. I should look exactly the same. It doesn't matter.
In this pipeline, you will.
In this pipeline, of course. That's what I mean.
Yeah, Jeff, and then Courtney.
Mine's more of a question. So it has two audio inputs, RCA, and it also has an XLR single that's line or mic. Does that have phantom power?
I don't. Yeah, it does. It does.
Brian is giving us a thumbs up.
Brian says it does. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, the sound guy.
So
he just gives us the thumbs up.
That's something the ATEM Mini does not have, is a pro mic input with phantom power.
Yep. And there's been issues where I've had, like, for instance, my Scorpio, for instance, as a USB-C, sometimes doesn't work all the time. I have to restart the computer to get it to resync it up or whatever. But if it's audio out into the web presenter, it gets seen all the time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just want to point out to hot switch between the SDI and the HDMI input, you got to have the optional display front for it, which is another $85, but it's well worth it.
Definitely buy it with it. Otherwise, you're in there flipping dip switches. Hosma, I'll let you close it up and then we'll move on.
Does it mean you can put your audio, like the headset, directly into the web presenter through the XLR?
You can. Yep. There were some sync issues with that, and I don't know if they're still there or not. There was at some point there was a sync issue.
I completely gave
up.
There
was a sync issue there that I haven't. It's one of the reasons I haven't used it for a while, is that it was off by frames. So I don't know if they fixed it or not. Usually, what I try to do is go into my camera and then into the web presenter, rather than because then it stays synced. If the audio goes into the camera. Next question.
Frank Haney of Ottawa is up next with, in audio hijack, is there a preferred order for the blocks? What processing should happen first?
Jason?
Your order for the blocks should be the same as an analog chain. And Mickey, please cut me off if I'm wrong here, but it should be preamp, compression, EQ, and then everything else.
Brian's here.
I know, Brian. Were you?
Oh, Brian! I'm so sorry, Brian.
Mickey was just going to say the same thing that I am going to say, probably, which is, yeah, that's about right. I mean, it's in, there's sort of a kind of standard order that you want your things to be in, that 90% of the time is gonna be what you want, and yeah, that's probably pretty close. As soon as in audio hijack you start putting in noise suppression or various other stranger processing, then it can get into that my most favorite answer, which is it depends. But I largely agree with that, and I would love input from Mickey, who knows as many things as I do. It just took him less time to learn them.
And our other expert here is Jeff. We'll jump to Jeff first, and then to Mickey. So we have our audio gurus here.
I would say you do subtractive EQ first. So the most common one would be high pass filtering. Take out the lows you don't need from the voice, which is going to get rid of some popping and things like that, before you go into any kind of dynamics processing. And then if you need it, some EQ after that for tonal correction. So you kind of have the fix it, take out the stuff you don't need first, and later the creative EQ. On to Mickey.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, totally agree with what Jeff mentioned. Like, I usually do a high pass because that's just, getting rid of trash you don't have to deal with anyway, at least for speech. And then I go with EQ after that, before compression, because I don't want a compressor to react on frequencies I like, say, if they're overpowering frequencies that I will get rid of anyway. I don't want the compressor to react to that, so I already dip those down and shape the tone to how I want it, so that the compressor's only acting on the actual frequencies I want there. And then I always have, if I do have to use noise suppression, always do that before compression, because you want to do the noise suppression when you have the most amount of dynamic range, signal to noise ratio. So you don't want to squeeze that down before you try to get rid of the noise, if that makes sense. You want, like, while the noise is as far away from the speech, that's when you want the noise suppression to try to do its job.
That's great. Perfect answers. Next question.
And it comes from Eric Hall in the panel from Mount Vernon, Washington. The Disney Imagineering team says live theatrical streaming productions cannot be done and be safe for performers. Are they correct? And a note, this is from a former Mouseketeer, I stand in awe, Eric, who now heads a local theater company.
Yeah, I think I don't think you can have.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. That's what that is. It's a challenge.
I don't think that it. You got to decide how important not getting COVID is, and then you decide whether you're going to put people on stage together. Like, it's just, you have to. You can make that, but having people. I mean, if you look at how hard they're. Well, but how hard? No, I mean, but we have to make that decision, because all the stuff that we're doing, whether it's sending kids back to school or doing all this other stuff, we got to make a qualitative decision about how important it is for people not to die from COVID or not to get it. Because if we decide that it's important, then we're going to keep them off stage, and we're going to keep our kids home, and we're going to keep putting masks on. We're not going to go anywhere. And we have to decide what an acceptable risk is. And I know that that's an odd answer, but you're having people sing and perform and sweat and there's like, there was a guy on TikTok that was showing like masks. He was talking about different masks and their effectiveness. And what he did is he went out when it's really cold, it's just to show you the vapor, so here's no mask, here's a handkerchief, here's an N95. And all I could see is they put the N95 on, and all I could see was a big puffs of vapor coming out behind it. I mean, it's got to go somewhere. And I was kind of like, that did not make me feel better about putting people in the same thing. And I'm, we're doing everything we can, working together, but we try not to touch the same equipment. And we're putting so much Perel on. I don't know if it's good for us. And, we got masks on, and we're trying to stay separate and everything else. But we're making a calculated risk. If we're saying that safety is the most important thing, especially, I mean, performing, like, we are really careful about trying to stay away from the performers. We still have some, and they're still spread out. But in something that's like dancing and that type of thing, seems to me like that's an awful lot of fluid, like just sweat and breathing heavy and everything else. I don't understand. I don't know how you wouldn't have a COVID outbreak. That's all. Jason, Raphael, Stuart, and Courtney, and then we'll move on.
Having been on plenty of live stages, I can tell you, if Disney, one of the best logistics planning company, any day in Disneyland is a fantastic, hundreds of performances every single day. If they can't figure it out, if they don't think it's a good idea, it probably isn't.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what his argument is.
Really loud, Eric. You're coming in really loud. Raphael?
Well, we've had dozens of choirs that were working, they're singing, and that ended up in like countless cases right about a week after.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, it's bound to happen.
Yep. Courtney and Stuart.
Yeah, you got to remember that Disney Imagineering has been in the business of removing the live performer from entertainment for many years with animatronics. And the other thing is, it is possible. I mean, look at Major League Basketball, football. They put people in a bubble, but that's the kind of sacrifice you have to do to maintain a safe environment. And Disney is hired. I know friends of mine have been hired as COVID-19 coordinators, and it's a salaried position. They're putting them on, year-long salaries to do coordination for just managing the logistics of keeping people safe on the set so that they can go back into production. Live shows they are desperate to get back into, but I don't think they've been able to conquer the bubble problem.
And as a Steelers fan, my game has been moved 3 times because that bubble isn't working. And so that's the thing is these are athletes. They're taking, they're worth millions of dollars. They're taking.
Yeah, you got to realize though, athletes want to go out and party every night.
Yeah,
Disney performers, maybe not so much.
Anyways,
could be worse. You could have been a Denver fan, Alex.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying what's happening though is that you're just seeing that as we keep on playing football games, it may slowly unravel. The whole season may unravel because it's just as there's more contact that just keeps on becoming more problematic. Stuart and then Jeff.
Pro tip on masks: don't use the N95 ones. Go and get the same sort that a panel beater and body worker for cars puts over. It covers the entire face, and it is a small particle filter, so you'll get a completely different thing. But back to Eric's question, and Courtney touched on it with Disney's history of getting rid of performers. Don't forget that Disney has already got stunt robots that do tumbles and flying things that people can't do. And they've got access to studios where people have got motion capture rigs. There is no reason why a performer wearing a motion capture rig can't directly control the robot performer.
Well, they're doing that.
They could do theatre things like that or live performances, but you still end up coming back to the problem isn't the performers on stage, it's how many people can you safely have in an arena as the audience. That's where the spreading is going to happen.
Yeah, and they're already doing these kind of mixed avatars on stage, for more in Korea than anywhere else, but definitely it's in some of the game activations we're seeing that. Go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll move on.
So we've been doing live performance of music, and all of those have been, if it's aerosol producing, vocal, brass, or winds, have been limited to 30 minutes. In a space live streamed, there may be a handful of parents or close friend audience, limited to 4 people in the venue, besides the performers on stage. If they're not, if it's piano or something like that, then they can go longer. And then anything that's what I see as the big problem here, Eric, as the live theatrical streaming, is if you want to have a long event, you run into big problems with anything that is vocal. So our opera production this semester was videoed in 30-minute increments. They would do 30 minutes of video, and then they would take a break for 30 minutes to let the air clear. They would come back in. And this was a string quartet with 2 singers on a full stage. So it was a very minimal crew, very minimal cast, minimal musicians, and still only 30 minutes at a time, all masked.
Next question.
Why the time length?
We're going to keep moving. Next question.
Moving along to Robert Gates of New York. Is it possible to share a link to the Office Hours Mic Check app? This is really helpful during your mic checks.
Yeah, this is just, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, the plugin that we've been using here, and it was first Tucker that put this to use for office hours. It's called WLM. It's made by Waves.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on to Benjamin Adiput, who's normally here the last week or so, but not here today. San Carlos, I think he's back in school. Pardon me?
He's back in school, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm back in school. Trevor Walker on Discord said the standard Polson mic is out of stock. Can the Sennheiser lock be cut off to get a normal 3.5 millimeter plug? Could somebody suggest a mic at a similar price point?
Is the Pile back in stock? I think the Pile may have come back in stock. I think our group has a tendency to sell these out because we're connected to a lot of other communities. So I did talk to education administrator that recommended 700 get bought. So I think that we have a tendency to ask for more than they're making. But I think that the piles might be back. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Courtney.
Yeah, the actual ring lock. Yeah, sure, you could Dremel it out, but just chop off the connector and learn some soldering. Yay.
There you go. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. See, here's the one off my pile that didn't work because it was a TRS. Just cut it off and put a TRS connector on the end of it, a regular TRS.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, be really careful. These are really, really small.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the Sennheiser lock has been a problem because it doesn't let it go all the way in on some of the devices, and that's been the reason that we try to recommend against that. But I thought that the pile sold out again, but I thought that version had come back to be available. And the pile and the Pulson. The Pulson's a little bit better, but they're very close. Next question.
The Sennheiser, somebody makes a connection that goes from that to XLR, but I couldn't find it.
No, we're not trying to go to XLR though, because then that creates a whole nother expensive thing. Like the reason that we're trying to do these little ones is because we're trying to go into a Tech Rise or a Sabrient. The Tech Rise we find has a little more gain than the Sabrient. So anyway, we're trying to, once we go to you can definitely get to XLR in a lot of different ways, and there's lots of tools, but then the digitization of it to get into the computer is more. Next question.
I do that, and then I take the XLR female into a quarter inch to 1/8 inch, and it doesn't matter if you have an adapter that's that long, and we'll break your report.
Just like a little it's like taking a little Japanese car and putting spoilers on the back and lights on the wheels.
You wrap the whole thing in electrical tape, you'll be fine.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois. Setting up the studio for Zoom meetings, I bought the Nanolite RGB and have it above the camera. My problem is I wear glasses and see the confidence monitor and other screens reflecting. How does this panel with all this technology keep it off the glasses?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so often that's the simple process of angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. The old traditional thing is to put maybe a little wad of gaffer's tape or something like that under the temple things and bend your glasses down so that the screen is coming in but reflecting down at your computer, not straight back. That's the simplest way. You can also get anti-reflective coating if you can find an optical shop still open during COVID.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I was just going to say you can do what I did and have your interocular lenses replaced.
Yeah, exactly. Contacts are the easiest thing. Yeah, contacts are the easiest thing. And some of it's okay. You just have to decide how much is okay. And but yeah, to Bill's point, you really play with the angles of the lights and the angles of the monitors to figure out what you're going to show. Next question.
Moving on to Alan Scott in New Brunswick, Canada. Is anyone using the LG 5K Thunderbolt display that Apple is selling? I need something for the Mac Mini that I will be ordering soon.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I am. In fact, I'm on it right now, and it's a just fine unit. Is it worth $1,200? I don't know. Probably not, but it's fairly accurate if you calibrate it, and it looks great.
There you go. Next question.
Moving on to John M. Gerard of Berkeley, California. In Filmic Pro Double Take, how do I take two separate video streams, both in full screen, so that when I edit the video, I can switch between the two cameras? Right now, I have one camera in full screen and the other camera in a window, and I can record this as one stream only.
I have not. Go ahead, Jason. I haven't used that Double Take.
I mean, my immediate thought was ATEM Mini ISO, or you're gonna be in a world of hurt.
No, they have it. There's Double Take is a little app there, but go ahead, Chris.
I believe we're talking about the Filmic Double Take, right?
Yep.
There is a function in it. It's something to do with icons and whatnot. It will record two separate files.
Right.
You can record it as a picture-in-picture, or you can record it as two ISO files. So there is a way to do it.
I think you have to pay for the app, and there's a weird caveat now that I'm thinking about it. I don't remember what it is, but there is a caveat.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, Mitchell's from Washington. What does star do in Zoom? I can see where it gets stored, but not where something can get selected and have it starred in any way. Is this just a vestigial tale, or are people using this feature a lot?
I don't even know what it is.
Is that applying a rating type star, starring something?
Maybe it's in the, if it's in any of the comments and not in the meetings, I don't know anything about it. Like Zoom has this whole little thing about like people getting together and there's a little friend thing and that little window that they open up every time you open up Zoom. I just close it. I have no idea what that does. And does anyone use, I don't even know where star would go in a meeting, unless it's in, maybe it's in the, that other window that I don't use.
We're not getting a lot of recognition here. Yeah.
Yep. Next
okay.
question.
Rick Combs of Columbia, Tennessee had a situation yesterday where I went to edit our YouTube video. It said it was still live broadcasting 2 hours after the event ended. I had to go to YouTube's studio settings and stop the live video. I'm broadcasting to Facebook and YouTube via Restream with Wirecast. Any thoughts?
We see that with Zoom too, where you can't, where it's not, every day that we do this webinar, I have to go to Zoom and close it. Close the live stream. Otherwise, people will text me and go, "Hey, I don't know if you know, but you're still running. It will run for 4 hours and then quit." And so, if I'm busy, I just let it run. I don't, it doesn't really matter to me. But usually my general pattern is I finish Zoom and I go up to YouTube and I turn it off. There's something about the close function that isn't working in YouTube via the API. The start function obviously works, but the close function is not working. Jason and then Courtney.
Yeah, YouTube and Restream have had, YouTube has changed the way that their OAuth integration works and the length of their token. I would just remove the YouTube channel and add it back again into Restream. That should do it.
It might be the length too. It may not let you turn it off after it's running. Maybe because we run really long events that it's not closing, but it doesn't close correctly. Courtney, you were going to say something?
No, you've already answered it. Thanks. Go ahead.
Next question.
Hasmik has the most charming metaphor of the day. The Blackmagic Pocket camera is the elephant's head. I need a snout. What glass for a medical event? Should it be motorized? If not, is focus and zoom capable off camera? Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, highly recommended yesterday to record a seated lecturer in a live question and answer session as a studio setup.
You want to explain that a little bit, Hasmik, and then we'll jump to Stuart.
Yeah, no, yesterday we discussed the camera I should use for the live Q&A with the medical event where the presenters would be taking on the Q&A. So once we get the camera, now we need to decide on the glass, the lens that I should have. And the question is, should the lens be motorized or not?
Good. Stuart?
Given that the camera can be remotely controlled, yes, I would say grab a Canon lens, but also find something that's weather sealed. If you're going to be putting a camera into an operating theater, they're going to need to sanitize the camera and the lens, and if any of that sort of fluid that they clean it with gets into the thing, it's not going to work. So weather sealed lens, whatever inside the thing will stay inside it, and they can sanitize the outside of the body.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have looked far and wide for a motorized zoom lens that works on the Pocket Cinema camera. The nearest I've been able to find is about 4K. It's not a cheap lens, but it is doable.
Also consider whether you need to buy it or rent it. So if you're over how many days is it? Is it a 1 week?
4 days. 4 days.
Yeah. So the other thing to look at is you can get a really nice lens for a week. That is, so like for instance, on there's a Canon, I think, makes like these like broadcast zoom lenses that are, 20 grand or 15 grand, but they don't cost that much per day. So, they're a couple hundred, $1,000 a day or $500 a day or something like that. And so you can rent those cameras, and those are full on servo lenses. That are broadcast lenses that'll fit on the EF mounts, and now you can control focus and zoom, from the through the ATEM to make those changes. I find that zoom is the one that's the most important, and you can do that with almost all the Canon lenses. It's being able to do an autofocus or to do to play with the zoom and the exposure. Most of the time when someone's seated, I'm going to go up there and frame them, and then I'm done. There's not like I don't have to do a lot of changing if they're seated. If they're moving around, then you're going to need a lot more, and it's going to be hard to make any of it work.
If it's not motorized, what can you control with the lens remotely?
The zoom, the focus.
Focus and aperture, I believe.
Focus and aperture are the two things that you can control. You just can't control zoom on it. So so again, that's just something to consider. Go ahead, Chris, and then Stuart.
Does a wireless focus pulling device make any sense to like wrap that little gearing around the zoom ring instead? And then I know the Moza that I own is like $250 when I bought it, and it's completely wireless and dedicated and fast. And I know they make them less expensive now.
That would totally work. But I mean, again, I think Alex's idea of rental for this particular question is the best way to go.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, definitely the rental. Hasmuk, I've just put a link to the first story I could find online for this sort of lens. So it'll give you something to look at that's from Canon and that would be controlled for its aperture and the like from the BMD body. But you can always get external motors that clip on and control things like the zoom and what have you. And this has even got the gears built onto the outside of it specifically for it.
Yeah, maybe the motorized lens is a Ferrari in a 60-kilometer zone, so maybe that's over the top. So I should just get the. I'm in discussion with Guy on the appropriate lens, and he suggested the Canon range, so I may choose one of those.
The thing is, a person seated, like what we're doing right now, I'm using a Canon 24-70 zoom lens, 2.8 or whatever. It works really well. I'm about halfway through the zoom, so I'm at like, or maybe less than half, like 35 mil right now, and so it's a good range, So I can control focus, which is again focus and aperture, which I think are the most important parts if you're having someone seated. And again, seated makes things a lot easier. Go ahead, Bill, and then Mickey, and then Jason really quickly.
In thinking about focus, the reason that a remote focus can be useful or not, if the person is at a fixed distance from the lens, if focus once and it's going to stay there, and if they're moving lateral back and forth at the same basic distance, they will stay in focus. It's only when they come toward the camera and lower the distance that they move out of focus, and at that point you want focus control. So the geometry of how people are moving between the camera and where they're presenting does matter for this.
And I would minimize it, minimize the amount that they move. That's one of the big reasons to give them a chair. Mickey, and then Jason.
Yeah, just on that topic, like I guess that it would highly depend on your opening, if you need a focus puller or not. But like on more traditional sets, you always have a focus puller no matter what. My question for Hasmuk is like, why the need for remote control? Is it like a number of manpower thing? Is it a COVID safety, or what's the reasoning for needing to do it remotely?
No, I'm just looking at future investment using this understanding what the options are. So I believe having the Blackmagic Pocket with the ATEM gives me many more options to control the camera. So I just wanted to know what the scope of that is.
Yep. And that's what the kits that I'm building right now, I'm building 11 kits right now, and they're 6Ks with 24-70 lenses on them. Those are being controlled by a Mac Mini. Those are tied into a VPN system so that I can log into the Mac Mini, and then through the Mac Mini log into the ATEM software. Then the ATEM's connected to it all, and then I can shade the camera and change focus and so on and so forth. So but I'm not worried about zoom. I'm going to have the person zoom. We'll figure that out with the person on the far end. But then have them, I do want to worry about focus because they may move to Bill's point, move a little further in or further back. And I want to be able to make those adjustments without asking them. The hardest thing to do for someone by themselves, if they're not in the same room, is focus it themselves. That's why focus is so important to me, is because, trying to get someone to focus themselves where they have to reach forward and then come back and then reach forward and then come back. It's a pain in the neck. Jason, real quickly, and then Mickey, real quick, and then we'll move on, but really quick.
This is the 70 to 200 2.8 IS3, and it's a fantastic lens. Costs about easily half as much, but the 24 to 70 is by far the one I use the most.
Yeah, for someone seated in front of a camera, it's the right length. Mickey.
Yeah, just really quick. Like if you don't have explicit need for remote control, there are other things that you could invest on first aside from that.
Next question.
Moving along to A. Mitchell's in Washington. Here's a throwdown question. Best stuff people are seeing this Cyber Monday. Best in general, best software, best single store, vendor, or manufacturer deals, best things for people in this industry. Let the debate begin.
I have to admit that I haven't, the isotrope one I'm probably going to get just because I haven't gotten those for a while. I think I have really old versions of that stuff. And then the $29, I was like, I'll use some of those. But I haven't really been paying much attention to it. I guess I've been so busy. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're looking for hardware deals, the problem is since most brick and mortar stores did Black Friday 3 weeks in advance, everything's sold out by now. By the time Cyber Monday rolls along, if you order something, it's not in stock and it won't be in stock till January. So don't count on any instant gratification on anything you want to buy on Cyber Monday. Because I looked at several of those sites that deal in Cyber Monday specials, and they go, well, let's look at laptops. Well, that's not available. That's not available. All the good stuff is really already gone. The good deal.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Actually, I'll wait till you made your point, because I was actually going to ask a question about buying something in a question that seems to have been deleted.
I don't know how we... go ahead, Jason.
OWC, we've been talking quite a bit about their docks and the smaller hubs. They've got some pretty good deals, and simple stuff like a black Apple mouse that would normally cost you $100. These are 25% off. Can't hurt.
I think the one that I did see that I'm really tempted by is B&H has a sale on the T5s, the Samsung T5s for $129 for 1 terabyte. And I thought to myself, I might get some more of those. So that's what I use for all my cameras. So that's tempting. All right, go ahead, Sky, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Small Rig has some nice things to attach your things with that I'm using for my Blackmagic. Also, I got one of the T5s, and Jeffrey had also given a recommendation of a place that's doing C-stands for like $100. So I need to get into that.
Yep, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I took advantage of the Restream.io pricing because it's lifetime. If you need a place to send up and test a stream, it's always nice. And then if you're in a location where you have just minimal bandwidth, like our church, we only have a 5 megabit up connection, but I can feed up once and then go out to different platforms. So Restream.io, I think it's 50% off for life. And then Adamus has the Shogun, normally $12.99 down to $8.99. That's a pretty good deal. Ninja is $100 off too. Aperture has a bunch of lights that have got some good deals, and looks like Deity mics. And then that little Video 360 camera, which I know Alex shifted gears on loving that one, but it's $79 down to $59 on those if you want some stocking stuffer type thing. I think that's about
I think at $59, the video is a pretty good deal. It's a pretty good camera for $59. I wouldn't use it in my events, but at this point, but I think that it's much better for $59. I don't think there's anything else that would be as good as far as that goes. So,
1080p.
Yeah.
Yeah. We noticed that the issue
it really is.
Is it?
I think it's an upscaled. I think it's an upscaled 720. That's what it looks like to me. There's a telltale aliasing in the 1080, so that tends to have me think that the way that alias is, I'm not sure it's 1080. I'm not saying it isn't, but something's going on there. So, Stuart, real quick, and the next question, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, since you mentioned B&H and Sky mentioned attaching things, the question that was missing was advice from B&H about needing a frame to go on a light panel, which is one of those foldable lights. I'm not sure who asked it, but the answer is Lee gels, because they're the same size as the light panels, and a couple of little magnets in each corner of the gel, which will magnetize to the corner pieces on the light panel. That's or cool. Velcro tabs if you want to go that way. Yep. And Guy, I have an answer for you for your question.
Next question.
Okay. I looked and answered and removed and nothing there. Dirk Brewer of Guatemala says, hi, Alex. After Zoomtopia presentation of new features, how far have you experimented with the customizable SDK development? How far are you integrating Zoom with Mukana?
We haven't gone very far. There's other things that have been on our both custom development and other things that we need to fix with the web pages and everything else before we get to that integration. And so yeah, haven't taken much ground there, but hopefully soon. Next question.
Guy Cochran from the panel. Have a hot rod vMix production PC interested in learning to fly. Is there a way to dual boot a PC to keep a system clean for installing Microsoft Flight Simulator?
Go ahead, Stuart.
2 hard drives. Then press your F key when you boot to switch which one you're booting from. So you got 2 C drives in the same machine.
With laptop.
Yeah. And a lot of laptops have a spare PCM CIA slot in underneath that you can open. A lot of them have got Wi-Fi things that you can put a little drive in as well.
But you don't have any way right now, Guy, to connect it?
No, it's a Razer Blade gaming style laptop that's running right now. And yeah, my dad got this newer laptop that is also even better than this one. I was kind of impressed that my dad got one with like 8 gigs of video RAM. It was like every spec was better than mine. And I'm like, I really want to play this game because it's super impressive for graphics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to, I'm of that old school mindset of I don't want to pollute my production machine with gaming stuff. So looking for
if you fly it,
some way to
I'm not
play
gonna,
this.
I don't want to poison the result, but if you fly it, I want to know where the first place you fly. It's
I got to play with one. He lives on Whidbey Island here, which is where the Naval Air Station is. So I actually got to fly it. The interesting thing was that, man, it changes the with the time of day. It actually shows you the sunset and everything. So I got to fly.
Where did the first time you flew? Where did you fly?
I went over Mount Baker and then back to Whidbey. So I took off from Whidbey and then over Mount Baker and then back down. Which
so you didn't
is
come
right
back. You didn't go to your house.
I didn't go to my house, but my dad was telling me where to go. So
I think it's like 75%. There was something I just saw. 75% of the people who the first time they fly Microsoft Simulator, the first thing they do is fly over their house. Like there's a pattern there. I'm just very curious about it. And I have to admit, the first time I flew it years ago, flew over my house. So I was like, I wonder what my house looks like from up here. Eric and then Jason.
Yeah, I land at the Bayview Airport, which is just 5 miles away. But anyway, in terms of the multiple boots of a Windows system, and you want to limit it to a single hard drive, it's a little bit hairy, but you repartition it and use a Linux boot manager to choose the partition upon boot. Jason's shaking his head, so I don't know. Maybe that's not the thing.
I'm going to give you a bit of a more elegant solution. Yes, the Grub bootloader will work. Terabyte Unlimited makes an app called Image for Windows that will allow you to truly image a Windows hard disk drive. And that will allow you to do a clean boot, back it up, take it off, put it back on. It's called Image for Windows, which is the most generic name. But again, Terabyte Unlimited, $20 app, fantastic.
Mickey and then Stuart.
So yeah, I just did a quick Google search, and it seems that if you repartition your drive and install a second installation of Windows, Windows has a built-in like boot menu that allows you to choose which installation to boot into. So yeah, it's interesting. I just found out now. I haven't touched Windows in years.
So built in.
Yep. Theoretically, Stuart.
Yeah, I'd avoid that one. It's not really as good as it is. The other option that all laptops have is boot from USB. So if you've got a USB-C connection that you can boot from, even say from a T5, it should boot and run as fast as an internal drive with a SATA connection.
Next question.
I'm so jealous of Guy having a fun place to fly. When I started Flight Simulator the first time, I was in Phoenix, and I realized I had an hour and a half of desert to fly over with nothing to look at. I didn't realize it was real time. Dan Huber, A. Mitchell says, Dan Huber, the camera setup sounds great. Can you please go over the details of how your school is using it and what it brings to you? Please also post a product link for the various components. Thanks.
I think we lost Dan. So we'll have to bring that up again. I think that was an early question and Dan was still here. So
Okay, we've only got
all
two more left.
Yep,
Stuart
next question.
Fairweather of Melbourne. How many Boot 2 uses can we come up with to dedicate an M1 Mac Mini to?
I was thinking that something that might apply to you, Alex, with being able to send out a computer with a camera already attached and it boots straight to Zoom and you can control it from your end. That's one thing. Another would be a kiosk application, obviously.
A lot of people use Mac Minis for kiosks. Like that's a super powerful. I mean, we've used them a lot for that type of thing, especially with touch screens. What we're sending out is, again, we're kind of just taking the I don't have time to figure this out mode of I've got a Mac Mini and then I'm using a Meraki Z3C, which is going to tie back into our Meraki VPN network, and it will take a SIM card so that if for some reason I'm having trouble transversing whatever the local internet is, I can still connect. I don't need to record on the far end. I'm recording locally. So I just need it to connect and be able to control things. And then from there, once it's in an internal network, it's easy for me to use Apple Remote Desktop to get to it and control it as needed. So that's kind of where I'm going right now. It'll keep evolving. Every time we build these kits, it's a different set of things. Jason?
One more thing on the Boot 2 issue. They don't even use T2s inside of the Mac Mini, if I'm mistaken. The whole thing is unified into the M1 architecture. So what that means is Boot 2 as kind of a bespoke thing can get hairy. I haven't really played with that, but yeah, I
didn't mean to boot. I meant as in boot to software that would run, and that's how the machine
As a startup. As a startup. No, I think that there's a lot of opportunities for that. As it kind of moves forward, to be able to have it just kind of light up and be ready to go. Hosmic, did you have something there? No, we caught him off guard. Next question, last question.
And the final one for today. Chris Comfort in New York asked, does anyone have any experience with Brooklyn Fiber? Their speeds read rather low for the prices they're charging.
It's Brooklyn. What do you expect?
Oh, come on.
if you're going to buy that fiber, I got a bridge that I can sell you, So what kind of speeds are there?
Let me take a look here. It's I mean, the services might be very guaranteed. Maybe that's what they're selling, but it's $75 a month for 25 down and 10 up. Free static IP address, 24/7 support, no install fee, no contract, no disconnection fee. So I don't know.
Sound like fiber.
No, well, it goes up to Pro, it goes up to. They had a giggy something, but the Pro is $215 a month for 80 down and 40 up. And
that's what you're paying for is the up there. By the way, I mean 215 for 40 up isn't that. It's hard where I live, at least. It's hard to get 40 up for less than 215. So that's not an unusual number for me. The 75 I think is a little heavy, but not. I don't think it's exorbitantly heavy. I mean, I think for I think 25 down, 10 up, because the 10, it's just a matter of whether it's guaranteed or not. There's a lot of people that'll tell you it's 10 up, and then you're getting 1.5. Well, that's a if it's guaranteed, that's a big deal to have 10 that you can count on.
But I'm also I pay $70 a month or 80 right now with this FiOS, and I'm getting 631 down and 600 up.
Well, that's FiOS. If you have FiOS, I don't
know. They're not real numbers.
Okay.
Well,
that's what I'm wondering.
I don't. No. FiOS is. I don't know. We work with a lot of FiOS. It's the real deal. Like if you have Google Fiber or FiOS, I don't even know how anyone survives if you have FiOS. Like if you because it's the number, the quality of the TV content is better. Like everything is better on FiOS than any other consumer thing that we work with on the far end. It's generally very fast, and you're probably getting latencies of less than 10 milliseconds.
Yeah, I don't
on the FiOS. It's often, generally we see FiOS usually runs at like 3 to 5 milliseconds of latency. I mean, it's really, really a really strong solution when it exists. It just doesn't exist everywhere. Jason, and then Bill, and then Mickey.
Yeah, sorry. Let me qualify my answer here. FiOS is fantastic when it's the FiOS that Alex is talking about. There are parts in New York where the FiOS or the fiber will be to the bottom of the building, and then it is like terribly networked or terribly split past that, and that's why I said those aren't real numbers. Either way, you know, what you need is an SLA, a service level agreement, and if they're willing to commit to that, you know, if they have one ready, those numbers actually don't sound too terrible to me.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Bill and then Raphael. I'm sorry.
Make
Mickey.
people feel bad because AT&T sprang AT&T fiber into our neighborhood and then to the houses. So I literally get 960 megabits per second up and down, and it's been solid as a rock since they came in and wired the neighborhood.
I hate you.
It is transformative for everything you have to do in a commercial sense from home.
Well, I'm going to keep on saying that I just think that our government needs to think about, you know, fiber to the house as a utility. You know, the U.S. government needs to think about fiber to the house as utility. All governments should, but I mean, it's transformative, like what you do and where industry goes, and the opportunities for the world get higher when everybody's got connectivity, because it just changes the way they work. When a lot of the stuff we have that isn't working or isn't expanding, like virtual events and everything else, it's partially because we don't have fiber to every house. Raphael and then Mickey.
Well, an SLA is maybe good, but it's just an insurance policy. It just means that they will give you some money if they fail. It doesn't mean they would meet the timing or the speed that they are advertising at any time. It just means they give you money if it doesn't work. So they can like provision that money for a certain amount of people, and then if it fails, they just give the money out. It doesn't cost them much.
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Jason.
Yeah, Chris, they mentioned, Brooklyn Fiber mentioned that they're giving away free static IP. Is that correct? Yeah. That's not free.
Okay. Yeah,
You're paying for that.
It's part of what you're paying for is a static IP.
Sure.
So it comes with the
it's
comes
not
with it.
free.
But static IPs, if it's V4 static, a V4 static IP is worth money. Like 15 to $20 a month, typically on most things. So that's not a usual thing that you get anymore. If it's V4, Jason, I mean, those are like gold.
Yeah, they really are. They shouldn't be, but they totally are, because there are a lot of things that just, you know, nobody wants to mess around and figure out how to make IPv6 work with it for lots of reasons that aren't worth getting into. Suffice it to say, bandwidth should not be an artificially scarce resource. It's not natural gas. It's not oil. It's not electricity. It's bandwidth. That's it.
Good, Raphael.
And IPv6 should be mandatory these days in the package. It maybe not. It maybe not is like people don't really know how to put it up, but it should be available because most machines nowadays are going to be able to grok it.
Yeah, it's still the V4s are. I know people who bought big blocks of V4s and it's paying for their house. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so that, you know, by making them available. Anyway, we have made it. I am working pretty hard at trying to keep us within the limit. So if you see me kind of moving through questions quickly or cutting people off, I'm looking at the number of questions that we have and making calculations all the time about that. So if I'm getting tighter, it's just because our attendees are getting better and better and better at asking more and more questions. And so do excuse my quickness with folks. I think as our attendees get better, the panelists are going to have to get better at being more to the point. You know, like I think we can go around a little bit, but we're going to have to keep on kind of fusing in to cover the distance. And I think that we still want to answer the questions in detail, but we want to find only go once around the house instead of twice when we answer questions. And I'm the worst at it, so I have to get better at it myself. So anyway, so thank you everyone. A reminder that there's the post show after this show. The link went out in here. I think I have it here. We'll put it in. Let's see here. Let's see. Let me make sure I get this right. Copy. I'll copy this invitation. I'm just going to put the whole invitation into Mukana if anyone wants to come. I'm going to set a couple people up, and then I'm going to and I have to go to work. But there, I put it into Mukana. if you guys want to jump out of this has been a new request of doing this. We're going to see if it works. If it peters out, then we'll stop doing it. But if you guys enjoy it, then we'll keep doing it. So there's a meeting that I'm going to close this and open, and then you can keep talking. So stand by.